Hello, hello everyone. It's Sunday, and that means we are doing our weekly episode of Woke Roundup, which is my show exclusively on Rockfin every Sunday evening, which goes over some of the most woke stories that I just haven't had a chance to cover so far this week. Now, you might think sometimes these are just like throwaway stories, like stories that maybe I didn't deem important or scandalous enough to cover throughout the week. No. Listen, I cannot tell you guys how many stories pop up throughout the week that I wish I had time to cover, and I just don't get to all of them. But these are definitely not throwaway stories. These are some of the top stories that I just hadn't gotten into yet this week, and we do them in one fell swoop on Sunday evenings on Rockfin, because on Rockfin, I know I won't be censored, I won't be demonetized, I won't be any of those things. I can say what I want to say instead of having to worry about what YouTube is going to do one way or another. And today, we are going to start with Cigna. Well, actually, what's kind of funny about this story in particular is, and I know this is like a retargeting thing, this is an ad for the Democratic state representative, actually from my town in Merrimack, New Hampshire, Wendy Thomas. And I find it kind of funny that I'm seeing Wendy's ad right now because Wendy has actually blocked me on Facebook. I am not allowed to see Wendy's posts on Facebook. I used to be friends with her husband, and then as soon as I left the confines of the Democratic Party, all that went horribly awry. But anyway, let's turn to Cigna and talk about something that is significantly more important than whether or not Wendy Thomas goes back to the State House in Concord. Cigna's critical race theory training, don't say brown bag lunch, and be mindful of religious privilege. Employees at one of the nation's largest health insurance providers are routinely subjected to far-left critical race theory lessons and asked not to consider white men in hiring decisions, according to leaked documents and checked logs obtained by the Washington Examiner. Those who work at Cigna told the Washington Examiner that they are expected to undergo sensitivity training they consider racist and discriminatory. Lessons include reviews of concepts such as white privilege, gender privilege, and something called religious privilege, which is described as a set of advantages that benefits believers of certain religions, but not people who practice other religions or no religion at all. Now, look, I did workplace training for the better part of the last decade. Actually, yeah, about the last decade. I never talked about religion in the workplace. That is the most absurd thing I ever heard. And I say this as someone who does not practice a common faith. I have a common belief system with most people in this country. I say that as someone who, when people learn about my belief system, they think I'm literally crazy. All right? This stuff has no place in the work environment at all whatsoever. Employees say they were pressured to comply with inclusive language outlining that suggested replacing terms like brown bag lunch with lunch and learn or grab and go. Let's see some of the things that they are forbidden from saying at Cigna. Grandfathered. Grandfathered. We can't talk about grandfathers, probably because some people don't have grandfathers. A continuation of or a legacy is a better term. Brown bag lunch should be replaced with lunch and learn, grab and go. Hey guys, this used to get me into trouble. I gotta tell you guys, like, I just did it again. Guys is how I greet people. It's just been the way it is my entire life. I used to get lectured by my former friends. They were like, Carlin, do you realize you are using gendered language? And I was like, so? Like, this is ridiculous, but they actually do get pissed off about this sort of stuff. And they suggest instead saying, hey team, or friends, or ally. Yes, I'm going to go and walk into a room and say, hey, allies. That is the most absurd thing. You're not allowed to say someone's articulate? Because we're offending people who aren't articulate? Okay. You're not allowed to say wives, husbands, boyfriends, girlfriends. You have to instead say spouse or partner. Mothering or fathering. Parenting. Going into this blind. I had a crazy day. Oh my God. I'm not allowed to say I had a crazy day. Of course not. Man hours as opposed to woman hours. Mankind. They're not allowed to say mankind, humanity, humankind. China virus. Ding, 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 ding. China virus is banned, and there are no alternatives. This is funny. Look at this. There are literally no alternatives they couldn't even say like COVID-19. All right. Quiet in the peanut gallery. Hecklers. Off the reservation went rogue. Gypped. This is actually, I have a member of my locals community who is a legitimate gypsy. Like, she's actually like, she's spent time with that particular culture and calls herself a gypsy. She doesn't use it as a pejorative, but she's actually been banned off of Nextdoor for using the term gypsy, even though she is like a literal gypsy. Okay. Master bedroom. I don't know why we're talking about the master bedroom in the workplace, but all right. Long time no see. No can do. Hip hip hooray. Whitelist or blacklist. You're too young to remember this. Or lovely lady. And they say, refrain from complimenting on physical appearance and instead direct compliments or feedback towards an individual's strengths, work accomplishments, and project results. Well, I mean, focusing on what people are doing work is actually really good advice, which is probably why you shouldn't be talking about religion in the work environment, Cigna. Other suggestions include avoiding the phrase no can do and replacing it with unavailable. Employees are told to avoid gendered descriptions of romantic partners or family members and not to use hip hip hooray at birthday parties so others feel included. Why would hip hip hooray make others feel okay? Sometimes you just don't ask questions, you just nod and you smile and you move on. Microaggressions listed included questions such as, do you even know what Facebook is? Or are you a nurse? Employees are also asked to go through a societal norms checklist and tick off boxes if they are white, Christian, or heterosexual. Our inclusive culture at Cigna means that we're working hard to ensure everyone feels respected, welcome, and like they belong, wrote Susan Stith, the Cigna Foundation's Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and Corporate Responsibility in an internal memo. This extends to the words we use, including understanding when certain terms might be perceived as negative or harmful, and being intentional about choosing positive alternatives. Cigna, valued in the tens of billions, boasts over 73,000 employees in offices worldwide. A 2020 Fortune 500 ranking placed the corporation as the number 13th largest in the country, measured by revenue. The company recommends employees learn more about racism by reading controversial textbooks such as White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo, How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. They include other books. Listen, like, at some point it gets boring even talking about these things because it is the same story every single time. Every single time. There is no variation among these stories. If you do it at Cigna, you do it at Coke, you do it at LinkedIn, you do it at any other company that's doing this type of training, it is the same thing every single time. And it's like they don't learn their lesson. You know, listen, people think that you show daylight on this stuff and it might embarrass the companies, and sometimes it does. Of course, when the Be Less White training got all that attention, LinkedIn ended up pulling it off of their platform. But it wasn't because they were embarrassed about the training. Coke still has their diversity program, folks. Cigna's still going to have their diversity program. We have to start fighting back against this and not letting up. And that's why it's so important to talk about it over and over and over again. This is a war of attrition, is what this is. It is a war of attrition. Who's going to give up first? Is it going to be the people fighting back against this? Or is it going to be the companies implementing this crap? It's got to be us. It's got to be the people fighting back. That's why we continue to review these stories, even though it's the same thing every single flipping time. Chat logs between an employee and hiring manager viewed by the Washington Examiner details an incident where a minority candidate with strong credentials performed exceptionally well in an interview. When the employee suggested to the hiring manager that the company waive the candidate through to the next step of the process, the hiring manager dismissed the candidate under the assumption that he was white. After learning that the candidate belonged to a minority group, the manager said she was excited to hire him, despite learning virtually nothing else about his background. Given the hiring practices they have in place where white male candidates are blocked, regardless of qualifications. I have to say, yes, there's obvious discrimination at this company, one employee told the Washington Examiner. Another time, an employee suggested a candidate with years of industry experience. That employee was informed by the hiring manager that the candidate, a white man, could not be interviewed because he did not meet diversity criteria. And I'm going to tell you this. After George Floyd's death, I had conversations with many CEOs across the country. Though primarily in California, California was like and that just is like, I had a lot of clients in California. And there were clients in other places too, but that was where most of them were based. And I heard over and over and over and over and over again, we're not hiring white men right now. 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 The qualifications didn't matter. They were making these decisions purely based on the person's race and the person's gender. And that's it. And I'm sorry, that's not fair. And it's not what's good for the organization either, because sometimes the white man is going to be the most qualified candidate. That's just the way it is. Sometimes he's not, sometimes he is. Why do organizations forget that their primary job is to actually create money, create value, create revenue, whatever it happens to be? And sometimes that's going to involve hiring white men because they happen to be the best for the job. But no. Organizations don't care about making money anymore. They don't care. They care about virtue signaling. Some employees at Cigna say the internal policy of explicit quotas creates a demoralizing effect in departments focused on tech or data. Meeting diversity requirements often means positions are left open for inordinate periods of time. I can't fill these jobs, one individual said, who described himself as a largely happy employee. Following the death of George Floyd last May, the company began holding mandatory town halls in which one employee described as a white guilt event. I had employees of mine bombarding me with messages telling me this is disgusting and wrong. During one of the meetings in June 2020, Cigna CEO David Cardani spoke about racism in the United States and told a story about how he, a white man, felt discrimination in his own life as a child when he wasn't allowed to play basketball with black players. Oh, I'm sure that went over really well. Last year, employees were required to fill out an action plan, among other things, asked how they intended to be more inclusive, as well as grade themselves on their conduct. In the Cigna My University portal, the company offers several lessons on alleged systemic racism in American society, etc., etc., etc. Racism and discrimination are destructive forces in our society, Cardani said in a press release. We, as a global health services company, firmly and unequivocally denounce racism and discrimination in all forms and are committed to confronting the issues with intensity, empathy, and accountability. Same story every single time. Because when we live in a land where everything is racist, this will be our continued and perpetual reality.